right, everyone. So welcome to the Discover Career Chats. Again, we're glad and excited to be here. I have a good friend that I've known for a while now, who is one of the most creative folks that I know. And without further ado, I just kind of want to get him describing like his journey and what he's doing. And I thought we saw each other on Halloween and just really thought that he was working on some really fascinating things. And we were talking about creativity versus consumption and the balance of that when they those two come into play and when consumption gets too much, then he feels the urge to work on his own things. So without further ado, I will pass it on to Matt Rhodes.
Hello, everyone. Well said, Jeff. I do think that in my life, really not my career, but my life, the create or consume is one of those uh, questions I keep asking myself. And once I get in consumption mode, it's sort of a trigger for me to seek out something else. So I'd like to kind of present my life and career. There's a couple big phases that I've gone through with what I've done personally and professionally, to talk about some of the projects I've done and give you a little oversight or overview of what I'm working on now in my professional career. So I will see if I can jump over here. I grew up in Virginia, outside of DC. Oh, and I should say, yeah, I've known Jeff for almost 20 years now. And when he asked if I wanted to talk about myself for an hour, so the answer was, of course, yes. So I grew up in outside of DC. My parents are from Richmond, Virginia, but they came up to DC, raised a family, and I was the middle of 5 children. We had a pretty big crew there, and we're all about 2 years apart, and sort of kept me busy as a kid. But I was very much a mama's boy. I was, always a good kid, and always felt like I was sort of the stable one, as the middle of children often are. But that's just what they say. And my family's very full of artists. We have graphic designers, we have carpenters, craftswomen. My mom's a craftswoman. My sister's an art school teacher. This is actually art from my kid. And my brother is a landscape artist. So we've all found these artistic ways of working. I am fortunately or unfortunately a computer nerd. This is a Commodore 64. This is a very old computer. It was the first one that we had, not my personal one here, but my parents could have purchased a game machine, an Atari or something like that, but they ended up purchasing this machine, which had a keyboard. That meant I could write computer code. And a lot of it was take a book that had a program in it and just type it, translate it into the Commodore and run it. But I was really amazed that I could write in logic and see the results on the screen. So even early on, I really enjoyed computer graphics and writing code that had a visual result. Still trying to hit the wrong key here. So this was a real catalyst for me. That decision to get a computer that had, or a gaming machine really, because that's what most of us used it for, that had a keyboard that I could use for actual computer coding, was one of the biggest, change points in my life. And having access to that was a very big factor. So I started coding. I started getting a little bit more into computers. I was always good at math. I went to high school and studied computers. I went to college and studied computers. And then I got my master's degree in computer science at UCSB. So I went from Virginia out to Santa Barbara. And once I got to California, I was kind of hooked. So I was there for quite a while. I got a lot more familiar with computer graphics. I got a lot more familiar with animation, and I got a lot more familiar with various types of computers. And this was a time when PC and Mac were kind of battling, but I was firmly in the Mac front, except for that Commodore. My first computer was a Mac, and I've had many Macs. I've actually coded for Mac and PC, but always enjoyed the Mac experience and everything that it offered. So as I got out of grad school and started my career, I was fortunate enough to find my way into a visual effects company. It's a company that writes computer software and makes images for movies so that when you see an explosion, or in this case, we made digital fur for an animated rat. We write the code. I was writing the code, and then we'd have animators and artists use that code and use other bits of software to produce the visual effects for films and movies. This was a very big deal for me because I was a big movie lover. I really liked animation. I started to do some personal projects with animation. I'm not going to show any of those because I'm not good at all, but I really had fun working on a variety of animations over the years. Um, and During that time, I was able to work on a couple films and really hone uh, my skills as a professional software developer. It was everything from really learning the hardcore uh, technologies behind rendering an image to all the math involved. Lots of angles, lots of calculations, lots of multiplications and exponentials, and all sorts of higher level math that I'm really glad I was able to take classes and achieve a lot of that training when I was in high school and college. So the first movie I worked on was American Werewolf in Paris. We wrote a digital hair renderer for the wolves in the film. And this is a very low res version of it, but every little hair was individually created and lit and shadows and all sorts of fun stuff like that. We also worked on a movie called Spawn, and this is one that many of my friends and I try not to talk about because our portion did not look great, and you can see a little bit of it here. But if you've seen that movie, there's a sequence in hell where there's a lot of fire and lava and a big devil demon, and woof, man, it was not pretty. I also worked on a movie called Polly, which was a very sweet movie about a talking parrot. And I wrote some software to animate or auto-animate the beak. So based on the soundtrack or the audio track, I did a little first pass of taking the frequencies and making the beak move. We matched a beak to a live parrot and made it look like it was talking. We did some eye expressions and some cool stuff there. So it was a nice, quiet little movie, but one of the things that we're most proud of. And I also worked on Star Trek Insurrection, and it's an okay movie, but I got to work on 3D clouds. So again, it's kind of this advancement of technology, and I had to learn all this stuff as we went. What's really neat about these movies is a lot of this stuff hadn't been done before. Rendering hair just hadn't been done. There was Island of Dr. Moreau, another movie that came out around the same time as that movie that also had some digital hair, but it was very new at the time. Star Trek Insurrection, I wrote some 3D volumetric clouds, which I don't really have a great representation of, where the spaceships and stuff would go around these big cloudy blobs in the sky or in space. And that was really fun to work with actual 3D volumetric materials. So as I moved from the movie industry, I was hired to write this suite of 3D animation software. And at first I started working with a group of 5 or 6, and we're all working remotely. And eventually I ended up being the sole developer for this. And I ended up writing 5 or 6 different programs. The idea behind this is let's make 3D easy. 3D is hard. 3D has lights and materials and the angles of the camera and textures. And there's all these things that if you just want something that looks cool, you want to hit a few buttons and have the thing just pop it out. So this tool and this suite of tools was really meant to make life easier for those who wanted cool 3D, but didn't really want to have to learn 3D itself. And so we made an interface that was pretty easy to use. You dialed in some numbers and you hit a few buttons and you got something out of it. Again, for me professionally, this is a good challenge because I had to learn a lot of new things. Pretty much everything we built was from scratch, and everything was custom made, everything from how we applied lights and materials to the rendering. I had to learn how to write a renderer. I got to work with a cloth simulation system. We wanted to do some flag stuff. So I learned how to create cloth within the 3D world that would react to wind and gravity and everything else. So that was, again, it's like, we don't know how to do this, go figure it out. The challenges were very inspirational. We also wrote some code that would fragmentize or break up 3D objects. And this was really fun because if you take a sphere or some word or letter, you have to cut it, you have to cut it again, cut it again, and cut it again, and then stitch it all up together so that it remains a 3D object. So again, another challenge where we didn't know how to do it. We came up with an idea, we implemented a bunch of tests, and eventually came up with something that was pretty easy to, again, to dial in and render out. Distribution was another thing we had to figure out. You take a bunny, you take a sphere, and you have all these little objects, and you want to place them all along the surface. So you have to do a lot of math to figure out the edge of the surface, the tangent of the surface, all these little nerdy terms, and figure out how do you orient each of these little pieces along an object. So again, another really fun challenge. And one of the things I had to do was, to output all this, we had to create a system where we could render out images, but we knew we wanted transparency, we wanted bumps, we wanted textures, lighting, reflections, all the things you would expect from, sort of a modern renderer. And that was another really good challenge for me, was to figure out how to do all of these complex things so that a user could go in and get beautiful imagery without having to do a lot of work themselves. So that phase of my career was really taking ownership of a suite of software, working with the person who was my boss, and building out, and he was the real product guy, and really building out something that was able to be used by the TV and film industry in a way that was easily used. Very few barriers to making beautiful imagery and animations. So during this time, the iPhone came out, and that changed the career paths for a lot of people. That caused a lot of apps to be made, inspired a lot of things. And this is sort of the creator consume part of my life. Is even though I was working professionally writing 3D graphics and animation software, I still had ideas that I wanted to apply for myself. And I didn't want to create a business out of it, even though technically I created a little business to sell some of this for a little bit. I didn't want it to be my career, but I wanted it to be, a hobby. So it is a little weird sometimes to have your hobby as the thing that you're doing in your regular career in terms of, themes. But I had some stuff that I wanted to do, and I built some apps. The phone really fit that. I like writing visual software, where the phone was very visual because of the display, but I also really like the gestures, the swiping, the tapping. I think that was a really fun new paradigm to get into. And so all these new paradigms have been interesting to me, and you'll see how that's kind of progressed with the stuff that I've done personally. So the first thing I wanted to do was, and when it comes to inspiration, you're going to see, especially in this section, the things that I do are usually because I have an idea or I want to learn something. And that desire to learn something and apply it to something that has an output or an outcome has been really something that I really recommend to people. Don't just say, hey, I want to, I don't want to just make a pretty picture. I'm going to learn how to paint so I can make a pretty picture. Learn the skill to deliver the end result. And that way you can deliver other end results if you wanted. So with this first app, I made a little game show, or a little game that was like a Jeopardy style, excuse me, a Jeopardy style game where you have a board, you have categories and point system. And so I built this little game engine where you have questions and answers. And the real inspiration here wasn't just questions and answers. It was, I noticed that whenever I typed into Google, I would type in how long is, and it would, it would spit down a bunch of answers. How long is a mile? How long is, an average commercial? And all these answers were really varied. And the other thing about Google is it's very local too. So if you're in Montana or California, you might get different answers to, how much does a cow, it might be weigh in, Montana. I don't even know what it'd be for California, but you get different answers. So I built this I could ask Google part of a question, get its responses, kind of mix them up for the game part, and then let the user or the player guess the answer. So I built this little app to learn how to code this language and how to use Google's system to create a game. I also did a little animation there, little particles with gravity and velocity, some not so complex math. So that was just, I wanted to learn a language. I wanted to learn how to code on the iPhone. And so I used it as a way to apply that knowledge within a game. Another thing I wanted, this was the inspiration for this was not to learn coding because I had already done that with autocomplete, but I had a tool that I needed. Whenever I take photos on my camera, I always take a bunch, that's common for all of us. We'll take 5 or 6, you can see there at the bottom. But usually you just want one. You don't need your photo album full of 10 million things. So for me, this became, hey, I need this tool. I need to learn how to write this tool. And I already learned the skills from before. So like I was saying before, I'm now applying those skills to something else. So the trickiest part of this was taking photos, looking at them in sequence, and then having a little math to compare them to see if they're close. And there's a little algorithm that works okay. But you can see here where this is my kid wearing a wig. It identifies that these images are close enough. So then I can just look at them all together and say, I want this one, and then you can delete the rest. So it's a nice little way of keeping my photo album a little tidier than normal. And so that's an app that I wrote because I was inspired by a need that I had. So this evolves. Languages evolve, my career evolves, I start learning more things. But in this time of my career, which maybe 5, 6 years ago, I had moved into management. I had moved into writing code professionally, but I wasn't doing the creative stuff that I like. So I was working with a team of developers working on iOS and iPad and Apple TV apps for a real estate company. And there's a really neat challenge in that, but I wasn't particularly inspired visually from that work. It was like a Zillow competitor, think of it that way. So I started getting interested in AR. And I knew that Apple had really, excuse me, done a good job of figuring out AR through the phone. And I thought, okay, I want to do something graphical, but I want to do something in AR. And as I started evolving the idea, and this is the sort of the end result is I made this little AR game, which is like a whack-a-mole game. This is the end result. To get here, I thought, okay, I want to do something with AR. I guess I'll show it. I'll show it before I show how I built it. You're looking through your phone, you're seeing the world being rendered. And so the challenge for me was, or the inspiration for me was, okay, the work stuff is work stuff. I want to get back into 3D. I want to get back into AR, or I wanted to get into AR, augmented reality. And I wanted to learn Apple's new 3D language. They had come out with this 3D language that's very fast, and I didn't know it. I knew other 3D languages, but not this one. So that was the inspiration, is learn this so that I can do something with it. A very common theme in how I go, or how I tend to work. So with the 3D language and using AR, my first experiment was, okay, what if I took the world and I made it 3D? And if I, through the camera, can find the orientation of the world and take that and convert it to a texture, then I can put that image, that texture, onto any 3D model that I put in the world. And if I put the two on top of each other, it blends pretty well. So this was just an experiment. This was, hey, can I make a little AR 3D something? That turned into, and this is kind of where my brain always goes, is fine. I wrote this little code. What do I do with it? I could just put it away. I could show it to friends and everyone marvels at it. But I usually like to have some end result. And games are always the easy answer because they're usually fairly simple to do in terms of the logic. They're easy to show off. People can play them for 2 minutes and never play them again, but at least you have a finished product. And so that's kind of where I went with this is I thought, okay, let's make if I'm here in this 3D world, let's make a little whack-a-mole game where things pop up and you smack them down, pop up, smack them down. So I started to think, okay, well, it was going to be I was going to make a mole, but I ended up making a badger initially. But then I made an alien and then I made a demon. And to make these, again, I'm not the best 3D artist. I'm not the best animator. I'm not the best any of that. I'm just a nerd who likes to do visual stuff. I had to build this. And to build this, I was looking at a couple different tools. And here's where more synchronicity kind of happens in my world. I had a VR or have a VR headset. And I used it for some interesting things, kind of look around and see what I could do with VR. I've thought of maybe writing some code, but it was a little bit of a hassle and not very Macintoshy. But what I found was Adobe's 3D modeler works in VR. So whoever built this 3D modeler and sold it to Adobe made it so that you could do all of your sculpting in VR. And when I found that out, it's like, yes, I'm absolutely going to finish this project and I'm going to really enjoy sitting in VR, manipulating the world. And that's exactly what happened. So I created the model with the VR headset on, and I'll show you a picture of this later. VR headset on and the little wands, and I'm sitting there stretching this guy out, sculpting the ears, using the tools to make the little fingers pointy and the teeth pointy. And then I used brushes to paint the guy to get all the colors right. Oh, so that's just the 3D model, untextured. And then I create a texture that wraps around this guy. They always look really crazy, but I decided to show it because you can like see the teeth at the bottom, maybe the eyes on the left side, always really funky when you look at 3D textures or a 3D model. And then this morning I decided to put the headset back on, get the model loaded up and show you guys kind of how it works. It's not the best representation, but I've got the wands, I've got my model, sort of a rough paint job on him. And I'm get to the point where I use tools to stretch out his ears, stretch out his horns. And you just sit there in the world. I had to coordinate the TV with my wands, but in general, I'm just in that world. I'm not looking at the TV at all. In fact, I can't even see the TV. I'm in this world with this 3D object doing the work. And the combination of AR, 3D language, VR for modeling, it's like this project just became, just like a true joy for me and a lot of work. Oh, this video is not playing very well. So this should show what it looks like through the phone. And these are apps that you can download from the App Store. So there's nothing holding you back from checking them out yourself. And everything's free. I decided the money stuff was a big pain in the butt. And oh, that was interesting. So you can see how it works. The little guys are in the world. You tap on them to get rid of them. It's all in 3D, so you can go close. This is what it looks like. Sorry about that. It looks like through the phone. Do not mute this one. It's a real 3D world, so you can get really close. Actually, using the texture of the floor to make the volcanoes. Sorry, that was very loud. Using the texture of the floor to make the volcanoes, doing that technique I was using with the rug. Have my little models, they animate, I'm keeping score. It's like all that complexity means this idea of, I wanted to learn this 3D language and I wanted to kind of poke around AR, kept going, kept getting better, kept getting more interesting to me and led to, a full-on game that's in the App Store. And I'm really proud of this one because it combined a lot of things creatively, but it feels cohesive as a game as well. Now, most people play it, they play it once, play it twice, they're done, that's fine. But I learned a lot along the way and still enjoy playing it. So any weird new scenario I'm at, like I go travel or I'm in some weird, funky, futuristic mall, I tend to create a couple little videos of my little guys in those places. Now, to kind of wrap up this section of my career, which is like the personal work. It's the stuff that I do for myself. Like I say, I kind of end up productizing it, making an official app, getting it on the App Store, but it's for my benefit. What this is another sort of important thing is by the time I'm done with this project, I've gotten everything from it that I need. I don't need validation of you saying this is the coolest game ever. I don't need you to buy it on the App Store or download it from the App Store. I don't need to have 10,000 people playing my game. The journey is the destination, as they say, and it's really true for me. In all of these cases, barely, if ever, look at download numbers, probably because it's like 30 or 100. But it's getting there. It's the creative process. It's the creative activity, the modeling in 3D, the learning of this nerdy language so that I can build something that looks like something. All those steps are the things that are satisfying. It's not the get rich quick scheme. It's not this is going to be the coolest thing ever. If you can pull that off, good for you. But for me, the journey gets me the satisfaction that I need from the work that I'm doing. So I have an Apple Vision Pro. I know it's ridiculously expensive, but I knew I wanted to code on it to see if I could, really, I wanted to see if I could translate the whack-a-mole game into VR. But for various tech reasons, it doesn't really allow that. So I noticed that it does really good finger tracking, and Apple tracks like 18 or 32 points on each part of your hand. And so I decided, okay, well, what can I do with that? And I'm kind of in the middle of formulating the idea, but I thought, okay, well, if you hold up the number one, you hold the two, like the Brits will do this for three, like put their thumb out for three, whereas I always did three with the first three fingers, not my thumb. So I thought, okay, well, I'll build an app where, again, kind of a game, because that's the easy way to go, where you have to, stuff happens in front of you, and you have to use your fingers to say how many things you see. Simple idea, but cool. Again, there's a lot of math in all this. This is all not free. This is all my own custom code. I have to do it all myself. A lot of math, a lot of angles, calculations, etc. But really satisfying in terms of the end result. So I hope I've turned this off. It may be loud too. Okay, good. But you can see, tracks your hands pretty well. So right now I'm just sort of putting little stars. I'd like these to be gloves. I'd like this to be a collaboration with my kid, who's 13 now and a really good artist. They draw characters and all sorts of stuff almost daily. And I'd like for them to build me, draw me gloves, and then I'll go in and sculpt them in 3D. I'd like for them to build me these, or draw the things that should be coming at the player. I just have stars right now, but they could be anything. So I want my kid named Cal to create all sorts of 3D objects or do drawings, and then I'll go create them into 3D, turn them into 3D. You can see I did all this morning. And then kind of have a collaboration with my child on, they'll do the art and I'll do the, all the nerdy stuff. So that's kind of where it is. It's kind of just concept right now, but I'm hoping to really turn this into a collaboration with my kid, which is, I'm really looking forward to. So that was personal stuff. Back to career. As I've evolved, I've always been a coder. I've learned that I really like management as well. I like putting together a team, having a goal of a product that we're building, and aligning everyone to deliver that. I always describe it as like an air traffic controller. I have all these people doing all these tasks, working towards this bigger product, and I'm just trying to align them so they don't conflict and they kind of get aligned so they all land together and we end up with this nice, beautiful product. And in my career, you've seen the movie stuff, some of my animation tools. I did the real estate work, which was like, look at a home, look at the pictures of a home. Here's details about the home. But then I got back into what I call Hollywood adjacent, which is a little bit more what I'm interested in. And I started running the iPhone and iPad and Apple TV team at a company called Pix. And this is a company that has a Hollywood review system. So Tom Cruise shoots a movie. He walks across the screen, but the director asks him to do it again and again and again. So they have 5 or 10 takes of Tom Cruise walking across the screen. Well, at some point, the director has to figure out which one he wants for his movie. So that footage goes into our network. You get to bring it up in a viewer. You get to see the different Tom Cruises, sometimes compare them and say, I like this one, I don't like this one. Draw on the screen on this one and say, hey, get rid of that light, or that shadow's a little weird. Can we fix it for the visual effects team? And our clientele is most of Hollywood. Most of the major studios use Pix. Well, recently, while I was at Pix, for the most part, we were building the next generation of our tool. This is actually the old version here. We were very happy with it. We think it had a lot of great ideas. And just as we were kind of on the last eighth or last quarter or so of getting it ready for our clients, our company was purchased by Autodesk. So our team was now merged with a team called Moxion. Autodesk had purchased one of our competitors, and now they've purchased us. So they've put us together and say, hey guys, go make that next generation thing. And this is something for the creators out there. Some of this stuff is really humbling. I spent 4.5 years working on a next generation tool that will never see the light of day. I could show it to you, but no one will see it. No client will use it. It's because we were purchased, and we were purchased for our clientele. We were purchased for some of our ideas, and that will find its way into the next version of the software we're writing. But all of that code is just sort of sitting there. So when you're creative, let the creativity be very satisfying, and don't always expect longer term results from what you're doing. And with the merger or the purchase of our company by Autodesk, it turns into a new challenge. So yes, I have a ton of code that'll never see the light of day, but I have a bunch of new code to write, and I can use all those ideas and influence how we go forward. And that's already happening. So I'm running a team of native developers, similar, we call it native developers because it's native to the devices, for very similar to what I was doing at Pix. I have a team about 14 or so. And this is part of what we're working on now. So we are merging technologies to build the next generation of a review tool. And it's like, take all the cool stuff we were trying to do at Pix with our new stuff, put it into what we already have here, and try to build out a new system. We have a product team, we have a web team, we have the iOS team, we have a backend team who writes all the stuff for the servers and the services. We have a design team and a client team. Excuse me. We have a lot of people working in pockets of responsibility to come together to build this platform. And we're finding various ways of using it. We're integrating with other software. We are sticking on the iPad, so a director can go to the set and watch the camera feed as it's being filmed. We're enhancing some of the review tools, so that it makes it easier for you to watermark or annotate or quickly compare two things. So this is what I'm doing now professionally, and there's a big, long, career ahead if all goes well with this, because it combines the technologies and ideas that I was working on the last several years with an existing product and building out even more stuff in the future. So it's been really satisfying talking to or working with this combined team. And the thing I'll note about the team is, with Pix, we had developers in the US and England and Hungary. So that's about a 9-hour difference stretched out. With Flow Capture, this new product, we now have New Zealand and Australia added to that. So we have 12 hours difference between Hungary and New Zealand's 12 hours. Australia's, I think Australia's a few more, but in an advantage. Anyway, we're 12 hours across the world. like, and with contractors that we've hired, I think we're at 9 or 10 different time zones. It's ridiculous. Uh, so that is its own challenge. But again, very gratifying being able to create this new tool that Hollywood's going to be using for the future with this crew of a real variety of engineers. So that's a pretty good summary of how I've gotten to where I've come and things I've learned along the way. The one thing I think I'll finish with is something I meant to mention early on when it comes to influence. It's like, who's encouraging you to be the nerd? Who's the one, you got the computer, great, but is there anyone kind of inspiring you? And it's something that I didn't recognize until I was probably in college or well into college. My dad, in his career, was the manager of computer centers at Bell Atlantic, what turned into AT&T. So this is a guy who was not a coder, but he was a manager of computer systems, manager of coders, managers of people who knew how to, do IT and interoperate with all these big fancy, at the time, really big computers. And it didn't really occur to me till later, because I always saw him as a carpenter. He's the carpenter, my mom's the craftswoman. It wasn't until then that I realized there's kind of a nerdy streak there that my dad, it wasn't really obvious, but I think I was trying to follow in the footsteps of my dad without realizing it. And he, encouraged the computer stuff, but it was never, hey, son, why don't you go write some code today? But I do realize that there was a strong influence early on with someone to look up to and not really model myself after, but someone where I saw, okay, there's a career here. There's a way to do this long term. So it was interesting to discover that years after it had already happened. So that's it for me. I did put my website. It's really motivatedpixels.com, but I regret that long name since the day I made it. But I have a shortened version you can get to. You can see a lot of the videos, samples that I showed from my personal stuff and some career stuff. And then maybe an animation or two, uh, if you want to see how terrible I am at that. So that's it for me. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
I first want to say thank you, Matt. That was fascinating, and I noticed we had I was taking notes while you were talking because there are points that I don't think we've ever talked about. We actually have clubhouses in Falls Church, Virginia, so we got to talk about that later on. Um, we have clubhouses in Australia. So anyway, I'll open it up to whoever wants to ask. I know there was a couple questions in the chat as well. Gus, you had a question?
Yeah, I will say amazing stuff, Matt. Really inspiring. When I was hearing you talk about the process that you like tinkering with and everything, it's really aligned with the Clubhouse learning model and what we do. And I've been lucky enough to also be tinkering with a bunch of like XR technologies and stuff. And have you been to MIT Reality Hack? It sounds like you might really enjoy that. I attended it earlier this year, and it was such a great experience. With my team even placed as a finalist in one of the projects that we created. So it's fun, and it just sounds like it's right up your alley. Um,
Yeah,
to
I've never been, but I'll say I read up on the Clubhouse, not having known very much about it. Really impressive what you guys do. This is very in line with how I could have been inspired as a kid. So it was it's really neat to read how you're doing things that could have turned me into me. Really impressed with that. But in terms of like all the XR stuff, it's a big thing. The one thing I'd note about VR is I went to a VR conference in Santa Barbara in grad school. So it was like 1994. And this was a very different world. VR today is pretty amazing. Back then it was like huge monster headset connected to 1,000 wires. And you had like, a flatly shaded, rectangle or a sphere that was all chunky. And I'm really glad I did that because I got to really see how it changed over the years. It's a fascinating technology that still has a ways to go.
Yep.
I have an Apple Vision Pro too, and it's amazing. So I'm gonna take it with it a little bit too.
Yeah, it's amazing input device display. I'm really, really impressed with that. I did see the question about Substance. Yes, I'm using the Substance modeler for that. And it was a coincidence that it worked in VR, but once I heard about that, I was like, okay, this project's definitely happening. And it's very zen, sitting in a world and just sculpting. It's, yeah, very, very calming.
Thanks, Matt. That was actually my question. And props, this is amazing. And your trajectory is like your result is the ideal Clubhouse member too. So hearing like how your path aligns with what we're doing methodically and intentionally in there towards that same result is good kind of like calibration for our methods. So yeah, really cool to hear. But just a quick follow up to the substance question. When you were when your screen when you're looking when we saw you and your screen casting from the headset, is that are you working in Substance in the headset, or was that a different app that you sent your Substance project to?
When I was doing the demon, the model of the,
Yeah. When we saw you, yeah, actually in the headset.
yeah, my headset was connected to the PC, which was
Ah,
running Modeler in 3D, and I was just seeing a black 3D world. I wasn't seeing any of my surroundings. So it was
gotcha.
as if the demon was here, and I was manipulating it, and I'd stretch it, and I'd massage it, and do all these things to it.
So that was you. You're using the Quest link
Quest 2, Quest
from
Link, yes.
your PC, and you were but you were controlling it with the VR controls. Ah, okay, good to know.
Yeah.
That's cool.
And I did try it with mouse and keyboard, and again, I'm not very good at this, but in 3D, I can model quite a bit better. Yeah.
Cool.
We've been exploring Gravity Sketch, so I don't think I've known anybody who's used Substance, but that's one to put on our list now. Because if it's an app just like how you can do Gravity Sketch, I think that's something to take a look at.
Very similar, and I think the tools are pretty easy to use. And also, I believe it's now free. I think Modeler is free. I don't think Painter is. It's not all free, but I think you can model in for free now.
Okay.
Ooh, that's good to know.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
'cause
know I don't own a license, and I have a sister-in-law who works for Adobe, and she let me know that it was free.
Nice.
That's great to know.
I have a question. So, Matt, when interacting with the young people that we interact with, um, we often try to get across the message of failure is not only an option, but it's necessary to achieve some of the things that you want to achieve. What's been like your relationship with failures and mistakes and um, kind of like what nuggets would you have for the young people that we work with in that regard?
Kind of along the lines of my creating the stuff is the thing that satisfies me. Failure would be, I did build these and put these on the App Store, and they're not selling. I keep saying selling, it's all free, but it's not getting out to the world. And I do know that when I first did my first app, I think I sold it for $1, and it, like no traction. I got $30 in the first 3 months or something. So I sort of shifted I shifted my expectations. One, I made it free. It's like, hey, if I can get out there and it's free, great. And two, I really kind of pulled back and said, doing it is what I needed from this. Failures happen all the time. I mean, when you write code, it's it's almost constant failures. But having that destination in sight means you know where you're going. So if I'm starting and I hit a failure and I don't have a destination, I may not see that there's more, and I might quit, or I might say, all right, well, I guess this isn't for me. But if I know that I'm really trying to end up way over here, all I know is that I'm in this direction now, and I got to start getting back in this direction. So I have to work differently. An example would be, if I'm, and this, if I'm writing my own software system and it's just not working out, it's buggy, it's not giving me what I want, there's probably other systems that are already built that I could use. Like I wrote the 3D engine for the AR project, the Whack-A-Mole, and I wrote all the code to draw the 3D objects and to move them. But if that didn't work out, there's already built 3D animation systems or 3D modeling systems that I could have used. And I could have stopped that, used the pre-existing stuff, make my life easier, and still work towards that destination. So it really is, don't let the things that stop you now stop you long term.
Great answer. Cool.
You got Nufundo got a good one in the chat.
Nomfundo, how you doing, my sister? Nomfundo is from South Africa. Matt.
Yeah.
Our youth is so into being coders and super passionate about coding, but they're getting too caught up in trying to outdo each other. They're more focused on creating the best project than enjoying the creative process itself. What methods could we use to really make them see other options of just being great and going further with their projects? They create and delete just so others can't see their work.
That's amazing. That's incredible. Here's the thing. If you're coding's hard, and if you can create anything with coding, you should be really proud of it. And the idea of not sharing with others and not showing others is nuts to me, only because it's so much work to get anything done. Now, if you have a bunch of coders, I get the competition, especially when you're young, because you just want to be the best. But think about this. If you've created this, and you know someone next to you's created this, and someone else has created this, start collaborating and think, what can we do together? If I'm good at doing the graphics and you're good at doing the database, we can create something with our individual skills. So instead of hiding your work, show your work, share it, and say, how do we combine to make something even better? That's the way companies are formed. And if you're young and starting in this direction, you're already seeing how this could become a career for you, or this could be something more significant that you contribute to, even if it's not a business. You could be contributing to a much bigger, much more exciting project than you could probably ever do on your own. And that's where I am. I do my own individual stuff, great. But at work, I'm with dozens of other people creating something much bigger than I'd ever do. And I would never know how to do the back-end software stuff. I would never want to learn how to do the web stuff. I could do the iOS stuff, but only with a team can I actually build something much bigger than myself.
That's good. I actually have another question, and I think the president from NVIDIA said something about it too. So of course we got to talk about the big elephant, the AI elephant in the room, right? And so this is probably going to branch out into several questions, but one, how has AI informed your work, like if you're using it at all? And two, with the tools that are available right now as far as coding, where you can put in the idea and the AI does all the coding for you. How would you encourage young people would you still encourage them to go and start with coding, or would you have them focus on really learning AI and working with AI in order to, kind of be current?
Yeah, that is the question of the day. And I come to this without knowing a lot about AI. I've experimented with it, I've read a little bit about it, but I don't use it in my day-to-day. I'm skeptical of the copyright issues, although my friend says, nah, the lawyers will just figure all that out. But when it comes to using AI and wanting to be a coder, but knowing that there are AI tools to help you out, here's what I'm finding for now. It's very easy to say, make me an algorithm to sort a bunch of numbers in sequential order. And it spits out something, and you use it, and it seems to work. But if you just rely on AI and you don't learn how to do it yourself, you don't know if what you're getting is right. And I actually have a tiny anecdote to this. I work with some very, very smart people, some of the smartest people I've ever worked with. I asked one of my developers to create a little algorithm to do a thing. Did some stuff with some strings, some text strings. He delivered this to me. It had some more nerdy talk, but it had unit tests. The algorithm was there. And I started looking at it, and I realized it wasn't quite right. I just looked at how it was working. And the output looked correct if you gave it the correct input. But if you gave it other input, it gave you the wrong answer. And so and because I'm not a big AI user, I thought, I wonder if he asked ChatGPT for this. So I went to ChatGPT and I said, give me an algorithm to do this thing. And it spit out almost identical the code that he had given me. And this is the smartest guy I know. He's incredibly intelligent, but he's starting to use AI in his day-to-day. So I went back and I said, well, it doesn't work in these scenarios. How about, and I kind of rewrote the algorithm. I said, why don't we kind of do it this way? So that's a good example where if it worked, great. 2 seconds, he's got his answer. He's moving on to the next task. Why spend 2 hours trying to write an algorithm if you can get it in 2 seconds? But the problem is he didn't validate it. He's smart enough to do it on his own, but he didn't say he trusted the system a little bit too much. So if I'm a new coder and I just trust AI, what I deliver these days, maybe it's 80% correct. I can't do that with a bank app. I can't do that with a military app. There's a lot of applications to computer programming that you cannot have zero mistakes. And there's ways to validate that, but that's all coding, that's all learning. It's not AI. So there are applications for it. And I think for some things, you can get what you need. But if you're not a good enough coder to validate that what it gave you is correct, then you still need to learn. You still need to learn how to code to validate the work. It's like if I'm a writer, a journalist, and I ask it to write an article on this movie that I saw. It could spit it out and glancing at it looks great. But if I'm a journalist, I could read it and know whether it sounds authentic, or read it and know whether it's correct, whether it's actually saying the things that happened in the movie. We're just still in that place where the correctness needs to be validated. That means you have to have all the skills.
Great.
So that's why I approach it.
Advice.
That's well said.
I was saying computational thinking is still like the key, right? It's just like knowing how it works so that you can problem solve and troubleshoot the code.
Yeah. Seeing them compete, it's like you want them to be competitive. That's the way you get better. That's the way you fail and then learn. You still have places to go. But that world of deleting your work after you're done is so wild. So I think it's really, hey, if these guys are good, if these kids are doing good stuff, try to find a new perspective on the way that they can keep doing stuff, find value in it, and then add to it. Don't let it just be this direction. Let it be that direction.
That's great. We just launched a pitch competition using where the young people were finding challenges in their community, creating solution, like coming up, brainstorming business ideas to solve that solution or solve that issue, and then using an AI app called Slingshot that helps them create a pitch deck. Does the market research, but it's more like a tool that I think everything that we're trying to do is focused sort of around you are the creator, you are the painter, you are the AI is just a brush, right? To enhance things. So, and some of what they created was just incredible, the business ideas and whatnot. So,
There are always things that you're good at, And then there's things that you don't want to do. And I know even as a coder, when I mention the word unit tests, these are things that you write to validate that your work is correct, but nobody wants to do it. If I could have AI do that, if I could just give it my code and it does the validation part, I'd be very happy. It doesn't make me any dumber. I still have to validate that it's doing what it's supposed to be doing, but I don't want to do that work. So if I'm your kid doing pitch decks and writing code, it's like, I don't want to have to do all that. I want to be the coder part. If I have to do the pitch deck, I don't mind some assistance. Yeah.
No, Fundo said the AI dependency is really true. I found myself not being able to construct a sentence without AI. So we really need to encourage our youth to learn and create on their own. Yes.
Yeah. If I can get, I haven't told this to anyone, but this is a thing that I've thought about. We have, and let's just say journalism. We have a bunch of journalists and AI starts taking all their work and starts generating more journalism. At some point, those journalists are going to lose their jobs because the AI is doing it for them. And at some point, the AI is not going to have any more journalists to pull from. So how do we get to the next, how do we evolve journalism when there is no journalism to learn from? How do we use AI for journalism? And this is something that's already happening with large language models. They think they're going to get better and better and better. They're now hitting a limit. They're putting twice as much effort into the model and getting like 2% increase. I think it's because we're running out of things to steal from, and they're actually feeding their models with dummy data. They're having the AI make up stuff to be fresh fodder for the AI models. And that's where I'm worried about. It's like, if we're using AI to the degree that we're losing the brains, we're not going to have anything to take from, which means we're going to hit some limit. And I think that might be starting to happen now. So be a coder, be a writer, learn those skills, be a musician, because at some point we're going to need you. It's just hard to see sometimes now with AI.
Sounds like that pendulum is going to swing back to where you're going to be exclusively needed. So at that point, there's going to be less writers and less coders, and so you're going to be in the highest of demand when
Right.
that zenith hits or whatever.
Yeah.
Matt, that's our time today. We super appreciate this. This was fascinating, and it was, even knowing you for so long, it was great to get a look into your career and your journey. We just I can't thank you enough.
Well, I can't thank you guys enough. Again, you guys are doing what could have built me, and I'm very, very happy to see across the world all of the effort that you're putting into helping these youths, giving them, inspiration and challenges and showing where things can go. Just keep driving these kids towards being creative. It's one of the things that we really truly need in this world is creativity.
Definitely. Thank you all. Thank you for participating. Thanks everyone for coming. And
Thank you very much.
everyone. All right, everyone.
Yes, thanks, Matt.
Here.